So I'll go through the cueing and then I'll explain to you my reasoning for it. So I ask people to bend down, press their feet down, press the pelvis down through the bones. And I usually reference the three corners of the feet. And I like to compare the three corners of the feet to the sacrum being a triangle, and like your shoulder blades having a connection with your pelvic halves, so on and so forth. So again, I'm probably setting up more till I get to this point. And then I think sit bones, wide and back. I'll use the sensation of a Y shape through the inner arches, inner thighs into the groins, and then widening with the thigh bones. And now sometimes I'll use the wishbone shape. Be like, so have your pelvis be the top of a wishbone, just spreading apart, not sit bones up to the sky. It's apart, left to right. Okay, widening away from one another. And then many of my classes know where their sacrum is. If not, I just put like a finger below the navel and say, behind there's your sacrum. Many of them know, for one reason or another. And then I teach them to come up from exhale so it can kind of take the pressure of the abdominal cavity, and they can start using a little lifting of the front low sacrum in and up. And then I use side waist muscles in and up. Once the heart lifts, then the low back can relax into a curve and arms reach up and expand in all directions, not just chest to fingers, but now your hips to your feet. And that feels really nice. Like I feel super, super grounded. And then I come down the same way. And then we'll eventually get the feet closer together. As we get warmer, I may encourage straighter legs, maybe. But if I come up the traditional way, and I really don't like to do this, but I'll do it anyway. Usually straight legs or straightish legs. Some people are finally getting smart now and they're telling you not to lock your knees out. Moxie's going to get in on this apparently. You want to come up. And then it's flat back and compression and holy crap, and I don't feel totally grounded. Also, my shoulder clicks every time my arms come up from the side straight. Every time. And yeah, my shoulder's a little messed up, but it never clicks when I reach up from here. So let's try another one. I'm just going in here. So press down into the core of the earth. And then maybe I will tell people to like soften the outer body, let the head hang, neutralize, turn into marshmallow puff, whatever works for them. And then inhale, press down into the core of the earth, offer the heart forward, keep the sit bones wide. And then I'll use an analogy. One I like to use is rolling pin. And I used to use rolling pin, just the imagery of the rolling pin. Now I use the word rolling pin technology, thanks to Dan, one of my teachers. Thank you, Dan. And then, so sit bones back and wide, and then feel the low belly start to rise as the rolling pin comes out of your hip creases. And then your navel lifts, and then the sides of the spine lift. And then suddenly you take the rolling pin from the heart and you stretch it out. And then relax into the body. Kind of feels nice. Okay, what else can we do here? And I always encourage the hands under the shoulders, not the hands at the feet. It gets just a little bit too much up here. All right. So maybe I'll lift and spread the toes and relax. Feel the inner arches ride up towards the groins, inner thighs back and wide. Unsqueeze your butt, because I see that a lot. It depends what I'm looking at. And then as I lift, inhale, and then exhale, bend to rise through your low belly like a little elevator rising from the bottom floor. And we'll go through this in breathing. From Mula Bandha is your basement up to your solar plexus. That's the first floor. Actually, what I'll say is pelvic floor is the basement. Up through the navel, pelvic diaphragm, first floor. And then the second floor, Uddiyana Bandha. And then sometimes we'll talk about the third floor is the heart. Or if I have a theme that requires or needs a little Jalandhara Bandha. I'll say throat to heart to throat. Some people know the chakras. I'll throw them in there because I reference the chakras a lot in class. Again, if you come to my class a lot, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you don't, I try to be kind and explain things. Now that can be applied to just about everything, right? So let's say I'm in down dog and I don't want to use the swing your shoulders over your hands because I really don't like the way that feels. Obviously there are other things to this, how to integrate yourself, but I may, for instance, say, come to your finger pads. Take your tarantula hands. Feel the centers of your palms lift like peaks of a mountain. And then slide your fingers down so the outer rims of the palms and the fingertips are still strong. And then I'll come around and I'll see almost invariably the knuckle of the index finger, where it meets the palm is lifted. So I'll say, think of, the knuckle of your index like your big toe. You want to press down on the big toe mound. So think of this as your index finger mound, which kind of is. And it'll press back here, keeping that sensation. And then that, when you do that, that kind of integrates the arms almost automatically. If not, you just cue to that. Lift the low belly to rise the legs. Inhale, bend the knees. Bend the elbows slightly back as though you were going to come to forearm stand. And we may have done something like this earlier, again, as a foreshadowing of, remember when we did, to come back to that idea just a little. And then the same cues apply. So it's, you bend your limbs, press deep into the earth, lift through your inner arches, inner thighs, widen towards the sit bones, right? Lift your low belly out of your ribs, start to sweep the front low spine in and up through the rib cage, lengthen. You can use the same cues here. So inhale, press down, exhale, lift and roll. And if people don't understand the same cues to go up from a forward bend to a stand, you can always use the handy strap behind them. Most people think it's kind of fun. And you take the strap here, and as they're lifting, they're getting some, when they bend into the earth, you're getting, like, it's physics, essentially. I've heard it called ground reaction force, but it's one of the Newton's laws of motion. And I'll do this to them, even as they stand sometimes. And they're like, oh. And I think about the sideways. And people really get it once you get tactile with them, for sure. They don't always understand how to access it in their body every time, but it really does stick with people eventually. You can do the same thing into, let's say you step back into lunge. I don't do a lot of stepping forward anymore because I really believe that people can't do it skillfully. In some of my classes I do for sure, and I teach that differently as well. So bend, I'm bending this leg, and then, so it's still, you still keep the sit bones wide apart. You're not clenching and squeezing. So I usually do cat-cow every class. So I'll use this term. Another one of my teachers uses it too. I was kind of delighted when I found out he used it. And I'll say, all right, so as you inhale, press your bones into the earth, pelvis down, exhale, lift your low belly like a cat belly, like we did cat-cow, and then sweep the frontal sacrum in and up, right? Heart rises, relax the low spine just a tad, reach up, boom. Now I don't get this pinching feeling. I'm more stable when I come up. And this is coming from somebody who had low back issues for a good 10 or so years. And you can do that into everything. So sometimes I'll bend, inhale, exhale. And you don't have to be over-exaggerated, but people really like it because it's so different from the way they move in regular yoga classes. I'm not saying that you have to do this all the time. And things like triangle from the ground up, same idea. Bend, press into the earth. This is a place where I may say, because now at this point we've talked about a little bit, like let the tailbone point down, directly underneath, and then press into the earth. Feel that Y shape or that wishbone shape in your sit bones. As you exhale, your navel is going to lift up towards your front knee. You're going to extend through the front left spine. Your heart's going to reach for it. And then this magical stuff happens. And then we straighten the legs and ta-da. And now my hip is exactly where it wants to be. It's not like the old school, like this, like popping your hip back doesn't make any sense. And it would pop my hip every time. My hips don't pop nearly as much anymore. Left side, so for years I couldn't get my hand flat in a triangle without risking injury to my hamstring. So I'm like, okay, that's just the way it is. It's how it's going to be. That's cool. First time I tried this, I put my hand on the outside usually. Last time was sort of an anomaly. Or my feet would have to be way in, which is fine too. But I have found more freedom. Inhale, press down. Press your feet down, widen the seat. As you exhale, lift the low belly muscles. You know, sweep the spine and up. Or sometimes I'll talk about the tickle muscles, where somebody comes around and like they want to tickle you, and you're like, oh, don't tickle me. So the tickle muscles in and up. And then with my legs bent, now it's like, boom, and I could never, let alone flat-handed. But this feels good in my body. And then you have people come over like, now you gotta stack your hips. I'm like, this feels great. This feels really good. There's a little pop there. I don't usually come up with straight legs. So this is a place where I might reference the tailbone more. I always like this image of, pretend like there's a little clementine dangling from your tailbone. It would nudge it down, but it wouldn't go so heavy that you'd have to clench your buttocks to hold yourself up, right? Knees and toes always in line. There could be exceptions, of course, but I mean, that's a nice rule of thumb. And then from here, I might say, so as you inhale, inhale space between your sit bones and your tail. As you exhale, feel the inner arches lift through the inner thighs. I do mention the pelvic floor a lot in class too. I'm just not doing it here for whatever reason. I'm not sure. And rising up. So everything kind of happens the same way. Everything happens from the ground up. If you're coming from your hands, let's say, in crow, arm balances, right? Need good hand, hasta bandha. So finger pads, and at this point, by the time we get to arm balances, we've done this a couple of times, and I don't cue it so much anymore, but it's always good on the first one. All right, finger pads, press in, slide the fingers down, keep retracting your claws to get the arch of the inner hand, rim of the fingers. All right, so as you exhale, you lift Mula Bandha. So at this point, everybody knows that they're lifting. There's a little pelvic floor lift, but they're using the front of the sacrum to go in and up. I don't always use the sacrum either. I just happen to be in a sacrum mood. Sometimes I'll just say, you know, pretend like you could stretch the skin from your inner thighs up to the navel, or I'll use tip of the pubic bone lifts up into the body, not forward, but up into the body. Or we might have a day where we're talking about the ACEs a lot, like, oh, so frontal hip point. So, you know, we'll talk about gathering the muscles in and then up, like a little drawstring, like a little trash bag drawstring. Tip of the pubic bone up. And every now and again in a class that understands it, I'll talk about coiling in the tailbone a little bit, because I always had this imagery, like when we did cat-cow. But a lot of people will think you mean this. And then you look like Ed Grimley. So anyways, finger pads, fingers, outer rim of palms, squeeze arms with legs, but have a little give in the arms too. The legs are definitely winning. And then as you exhale, lift and rise. Keep your sit bones wide like you're in a squat. Normally we come from squat from here, right? And then take it to your heart. So once your heart reaches forward, you may come forward here, you know, doing a bunch of things. And then coming from that position,
I feel like people, and they take their knees where they're comfortable. I don't direct their knees in anyone's spot. Eventually, you see that they can do this easily. I'll say, oh, try your knees in your armpits. Or not everybody's leg bones can, have the same length and can do certain things at certain times. And then, of course, you want the inflexible people to be able to do crow too. And I think, it makes a really big difference if I look at somebody in a pose and they look like they're straining or they're hunching and there's not space in their joints and they're like really crunchy, like. All right, so anyways, chair pose. So usually it's like, okay, and then sink into chair and the arms go up and then it's like, I feel this crunching here. I didn't really get a good instruction into it. So I usually do the first chair from forward bend and I'll say, okay, now it does help for me to have my big toe mounds together and my heels apart, but I don't instruct that at first. Usually it's feet are apart and then the next ones we try the feet position. So same thing. Bend the knees generously and come to a neutral position. Wave it side to side. Find your inner seaweed. And then come to stillness. Think of the 3 bony parts of your feet. Inhale, press your pelvis down through your bones into your feet. Feel the sit bones widen. As you exhale, use your rolling pin technology. There we go. Lifting the front low spine. Keeping the head fairly neutral. Let the sides of your ribs lift up, heart over hips. Then press into your feet even more. Let the lumbar spine relax. Stretch out in all directions. So that's how we come up to a stand. Same thing here, except now I say keep the sit bones wide, keep the weight in your heels, keep sitting in your chair. Same thing. People usually come up pretty comfortable here. I see just enough curve. There's still people that will, no matter what, come up correctly, and then you see this. No, you had it right the first time. It was cool. And those are usually people that have been doing yoga for a really, really long time. In other classes. And then they come to my class and they realize that their instincts were correct on how to come up. I use genie arms a lot, okay? Because a lot of people have shoulder issues and this just isn't always great and fun all the time. And then eventually at some point we come here. And then of course there's the other way to do it, which is to take your forearms here. Your feet go back. I like to have wide feet to start in chair and let people know it's okay to do that. So that's important. And I haven't really mentioned the tailbone once, but my tailbone is always in a pretty darn nice neutral position, and I know because my SI joints aren't acting up, and they've been acting up for the last couple days because I've been sitting funny. It's my own fault. All right, so from here it's like, okay, so let your sit bones reach back, and this also it's all this cueing of, inner thighs into the groins and sit bones wide, pressing into your feet, and then activating things from the front line of the body before you come up into something. It helps the heads of the femurs kind of go back into the socket instead of pushing forward all the time, which is a big issue for my left leg. And when that happens, you're preparing your body, for one thing, to activate the deeper core muscles. It's hard to activate your deeper core muscles when you're pushing them out and you're killing the SI joint here. So it widens the base of the pelvis is what I really want to get to, which gives yourself space and freedom. And in belly dancing, they give you very similar cues. Really similar stuff. They always say the knees should always be slightly bent. Everyone's a little different. But then they give you this settling into the pelvis, let the pelvis spread and widen, and that way you can, because otherwise you're not going to have access to move freely. And you do want to move freely here. You don't want to be stuck in clenching. There may be a time and a place that's appropriate, sure, but all the time. And then trying to move your body from symmetrical to asymmetrical, with all that stuckness and tightness, everything's going to get torqued because it's moving at the mercy of your outer body, your limbs. And that's not really, I think, holistic. So that's a whole, I could go through a whole workshop on this, just revamping the whole sun salutation sequence to make it more efficient Using more muscle groups, you're going to use more muscle groups, so you'll heat up more for sure, but then you're not overdoing it anywhere in any one particular part of the body, particularly the, the joints and you have joints back here too. So that's my take on the tailbone. I do get into the tailbone more when people are a little bit more learned and they kind of get it. But otherwise, I don't see a reason to cue it until maybe later in the class, or just later in beginner classes evolution. And it's evidence from watching, because I've had several students now, particularly in my vinyasa classes, that have been coming for well over a year, and I can see the difference in their body. And they can come 3 times a week, some of them, and it's like before they said, I couldn't do yoga more than once a week, so it hurt my body, and I'd have to go back to it. I'm thinking, well, why were you doing it if it kept hurting you? But it's just how we're kind of programmed, no pain, no gain, or I'm going to push myself through it. But yoga, as I always understood it from when I very first started, was that it should be healing. It should feel like healing. And healing and building strength don't have to be mutually exclusive at all. And if you feel like you're pounding on something, or you're hurting something, or always exacerbating something, that to me isn't what yoga is for me anyways. The minute that it starts pulling at me, I have to, pulling me in directions of, I want to do this, but it hurts, then it should be, I want to do it feels good. So that's important, I think. One last thing. The vast majority of my students are coming from like Bikram or hardcore like vinyasa style power yoga classes, and they're coming into my classes, and over time I start to learn, like, even though I ask in the beginning, things don't always come out right away. They're coming kind of broken, and they think that they can't do vinyasa practice anymore, or they can't do a strong practice because they have, a hamstring this and SI joint this, all stuff that I've experienced. So I like totally get where it is, and they think they have a strong core, but it's like the outer core, which is important, but or they're older and they feel like, I guess I can't do difficult yoga anymore. I guess I can't challenge myself because I've hurt myself, and they found a totally different way of moving, and most of them are sticking around and coming back to classes. And even if they don't come to me, they say, I take what you give me into other classes. And sometimes the teachers ask me, like, I noticed you were moving like this. Like, thankfully nobody accosts them about it that I know of. And they said that, it's helped them rejuvenate their practice, and I feel great. And it's not me. I mean, it's them accessing their bodies, and they're just taking the information and they're running with it. Because conversely, I have people that have been coming to my classes for over a year that still, because of years and years of their own conditioning, will not move their arms any way but this every time. And that's fine. Like, it's cool. And some of them are just starting now to not come up from their lunges like this. Because I'll see them and I'll watch them, and then they'll come to me when they get comfortable and tell me about low back this and lumbar this and knees and other things. And I'll say, well, that's why I teach this way. Or shoulder stuff, like big time shoulder stuff, especially in guys. And I'll kind of guide them towards that way of practicing and transitioning. And then they start to get it, but some of them are still stuck in their ways, and they keep coming back to class, though, right? So, and they're super nice people, and I'm glad that they're practicing the way that they feel is best for them. So, just wanted to give that out to you to know that experientially, I'm, even though I've heard wonderful things, and in my own body it feels great and it's healed me, I've also seen it work on other people over years of time. So, that is my little spiel. If you have any questions, just give me an email. Watch some of my videos and see how I employ some of the techniques and the cueing, because I do it everywhere. Even in slow hatha classes, I throw it in little bits at a time, like little breadcrumbs. And hopefully, it's helped you.